On this edition of the program, we got a little something for everybody. Duplicitous super PACs, the moderator from the Allred Ted Cruz debate. We have our narrative draft, and you've been reading polls wrong your entire life. We bring on somebody to educate you. Also, Sinwar's dead, so everything might be different in the Mideast by the time that you listen to this. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for October 18th, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you. Got a lot going on. We have Jason Whitley of WFAA. You might have seen him in your social media feeds because he was the moderator of Ted Cruz, one of the two moderators of Ted Cruz and Allred. We talk about that whole situation, how it came together, and what he thinks of Texas politics just in general. Great conversation. We then welcome our friends, Evan Scrimshaw and Ryan Jakubowski, to do our narrative draft. What are the people talking about now that will be the dominant conversation after the election? Try to peer ahead in the future a little bit. And then Carl Allen, data scientist, comes on to talk about polling and the difference between margins and vote shares. So if you are into minutia polling and understanding data better, to be totally honest with you, then you're definitely going to want to listen to that. That's going to come up at the end of the show. But I want to start you guys off with something that is fascinating, just amazing to me. There's a lot of money floating around in this election. And with a lot of money comes some chicanery. So there is a super PAC that I want to tell you guys about. It got $3 million, according to the FEC, at the end of the summer. And it is now running ads. But I want to play these two ads back to back for you. This is the first ad that is playing online, specifically targeted.
Kamala Harris and Alyssa Slotkin have proven to us they are the team we can trust to stand up for the Jewish community. Harris and Slotkin have fought against rising anti-Semitism happening in our country and right here in Michigan. Harris even stood up to protesters as they attempted to speak out against the war in Gaza. And when it comes to the October 7th terrorist attack, both of them agree Israel has the right to defend itself. Kamala Harris and Alyssa Slotkin, the pro-Israel team we can trust.
The pro-Israel team that you can trust. Very interesting. This is the Future Coalition PAC. Now, what's curious is that they are also paying to run this ad on YouTube.
In Jewish communities throughout America, questions are being asked. Why did Kamala Harris support denying Israel the weapons needed to defeat the Hamas terrorists who massacred thousands? And why did Harris show sympathy for college protesters who are rabidly anti-Semitic? And why is she running ads pandering to Palestine? We must stand up to anti-Semitism. No matter the political party, Jewish voters must say no more. Kamala Harris, we say no more.
Wait a minute. Why would Kamala Harris, the same Kamala Harris who is the guardian for Israel with Alyssa Slotkin, also be being told no more because she's pandering? She's sympathetic to the terrorists. Why would the same PAC run those two diametrically opposed ads? Well, thanks to the Google Ad Transparency Report, we know exactly why, because we can tell where those ads were targeted. The ad featuring Kamala Harris pandering to anti-Semitic protests are targeted in one state, Pennsylvania. It also features B-roll for people who are only listening of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. But it's not just anywhere, it's the affluent suburbs of Pennsylvania, the same places that Republicans are hoping they don't suffer too many losses from and have a higher propensity of Pennsylvania's Jewish vote. We talked about that with Carol Markowitz on the show on Wednesday. But wait a minute. Where is that ad that specifically touts how strong Kamala Harris is on Israel running? That ad is being targeted toward the Dearborn communities of Michigan and the college campuses of Michigan, the same places that they want to depress. You might remember that when Claire Mignon was on the show a couple weeks ago, she was just in Dearborn. She said specifically that one of the things that stuck out to the Arab population there was when Kamala Harris shut down the protester that was talking about Gaza.
So it was seen as a humiliation, totally. And then Detroit happened. You know, if you want Donald Trump to win, just say so. Just say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking. When she said that to a group of girls who were saying, Kamala, you can't hide. We won't vote for genocide.
And what is highlighted as a positive thing in that ad? That exact moment.
And right here in Michigan, Harris even stood up to protesters as they attempted to speak out against the war in Gaza.
They're playing both sides. I want to thank William in our Substack chat for bringing that to our attention, and a big credit to Jewish Insider that first figured out that this thing was going on. But wow, crazy, crazy times. Okay, let's get into our first interview. This is with Jason Whitley of WFAA. Joining me now is a face you might have seen scrolling across your social media feed over the last few days, because he was at the center of one of the biggest events in American political discourse, the debate between Ted Cruz and Colin Allred. It is Jason Whitley of WFAA, the senior political reporter and the host of Inside Texas Politics. Thanks for joining us, Jason.
Hey, good to see you, Justin. Thanks for having me, man.
I would love, before we get into the event, just kind of hear how stuff like this comes together from the inside, because from what I gathered, this was these are two campaigns that don't really like each other, and there weren't a whole lot of people there. So from your perspective, what's the earliest rumblings that you have that this is going to be something that you're a part of?
Yeah, excellent question. We've done at WFAA, we've done just in my time here, 20-something years with our company, we've done probably a dozen debates or so. So we have experience doing debates. And we just realized the other day that Ted Cruz has been in this building and debated on our channel more than any other politician in Texas history, which is interesting.
Wow.
But that is interesting, considering he ran in the primary in 2012. He got that. He's run 2 or 3 times since then. But this whole thing started, and debates, general election debates, usually start just before the primary is over. So here we were at the end of February, beginning of March, and we knew that we wanted to potentially host this. We're not the only ones. A lot of people want to host these debates,
sure,
because it has a lot of eyeballs on them, and a lot of people listening as well.
And Texas has a lot of major media markets. So that's pretty competitive.
It's a competitive race to get one of these debates. So we reached out to both campaigns pretty early on, right after the primary, and said, listen, I think it's actually the day after the primary. Listen, we want to do this. We have experience doing this. You probably know that, but here are some links to previous debates we did. Consider us, please. And we've stayed in touch with the camps since then. But also, in the meantime, I regularly talk to the Cruz campaign and the Allred campaign, since we have this political TV program. So we're constantly fresh in their minds in that sense. My boss essentially stayed in touch with them constantly. Have you made a decision? What do you think?
Yeah.
And campaigns don't make decisions on these things until they see how the polling shakes out.
Yeah.
If Cruz is way ahead, why would he want to debate? He wouldn't want to debate. But this is a tight race. So they decided that, we will debate. And we actually started rehearsing this and practicing for this about 6 weeks ago. Not 100% sure we were going to get it, but wanted to be there just in case. And then finally, both campaigns said, sure, go for it. And it's interesting. I'll say one more thing. I'm not one of those guys on the podcast going to talk a lot. But I will say this, just because you asked about the mechanics of it. We started working on our questions 5 or 6 weeks ago as well, too. A team of multiple media agencies, talking about stuff. And then, up until 24, 48 hours out, I get people saying, hey, I hear the debate's coming up. Here are some questions you ought to ask. I'm like, good point. I appreciate that, but we're way down the track on that. Go ahead.
I can only imagine, yeah, and especially because moderation in debates has become something that over the last 8 years has been particularly contentious lately. So from your perspective, what are the ethics and guiding lines for you as a moderator, especially because the spotlight has been on the job a lot more?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it has been on the job, unfortunately, in today's political climate. I think the job of a moderator is to stay on the sidelines. Everyone who's moderated a debate probably thinks that, but I don't want to throw shade at the other people who've hosted debates this election cycle, but it's been hard to do that. I mean, when I watch debates as just a viewer, I'm like, why didn't you follow up on that? Why didn't you say this? Why didn't you fact check? And that's hard to do. It's hard to do live, but I'll say this also. We expect, as a moderator at this media organization, I expect the other candidate to do the fact checking.
Yes.
The other candidate lives it more than I live it and knows the voting record and the intricacies and mechanics involved in a lot of these bills more so than any journalist out there, even if you're on Capitol Hill every day. So they know that. And then the last thing I'd say about this, too, is I had some experience on this. In 2018, when Ted Cruz ran the last time for a second 6-year term in the Senate, he ran against a guy named Beto O'Rourke, who was a congressman from El Paso.
Oh, yes.
O'Rourke, dynamic candidate. But the way we learned something in that debate, too. We hosted that one in 2018. The way we had it set up then, 2 moderators, me and a colleague of mine, the way it worked is you have 2 people that you're asking questions to, 2 candidates, and I ended up asking all the questions to Ted Cruz. My colleague asked all the questions to Beto O'Rourke, so I was asking a lot more follow-ups to Cruz, and the colleague was asking a lot fewer, so it looked like we were picking on Cruz. And at one point, I became a meme. This is the only time it's ever happened, Justin, but I became a meme when I, in like 10th follow-up to Cruz, he said, "Don't interrupt me, Jason. Don't interrupt me." And so that was kind of what I was trying to avoid this time. And it's hard to do. I don't want to take his time, but I do want to make sure viewers get their questions answered.
Yeah, my as somebody who's in the cheap seats here and just kind of watching and talking about it on the internet, the guideline that I would say is, number one, you just and you know better than anybody, live television's really hard. It's very, very hard to kind of play traffic cop with a lot of this stuff in general. Most people could not do it, let alone have the recall ability to have a fact check that is on time, well articulated, doesn't disturb the flow of the conversation because you might get something tangentially wrong, but then also be elucidating to the audience at home. That's really, really, really hard. And I think that it's often, not only is it an expectation from viewers that I think is quite frankly unrealistic, but at least in terms of it happening all the time, but also it's the fastest way that, like you said, you can become a meme. You get over your skis. Now all of a sudden you're Candy Crowley and everybody's talking about how you elected Barack Obama. It's a hard thing to do. But one of the things that I did notice that you had was just follow-ups. So if you ask a hard question, or a yes or no question, and it's dodged, as politicians are wont to do, you're going to go back and say, hey, did you answer this question? And I think you went back to Ted Cruz multiple times. Do you have like a 3 strikes you're out rule, or like any a time that you're just gonna say like, all right, I've given this to you. The point has been made that you're not going to answer the question outright. We can move on.
Yeah, that's a great question. The way we built the debate, we had 2 hot button issues off the top we were kind of hoping would start a fire: abortion and border. Abortion is something that Allred wants to talk about and go against Cruz on. The border is something Cruz wants to go against Allred on. And I knew out of the gate that both of these guys probably wouldn't want to really wade too deep into either of these issues that they think or they have exposure on. So abortion was the first question. Abortion went to Cruz. And it was about whether he would support exceptions for rape or incest in the Texas law. Now, he's running for federal office. The Texas law is decided by the state legislature in Austin. But I wanted to know as a Texan and as a father, because Republicans, for 50 years said, oh, outlaw abortion. And then it was outlawed, and then become the dog that catches the car, and now they don't want to talk about it. So to answer that question, I didn't think he would, and I'd asked him, I interviewed him about 6 weeks before the debate, and I asked him a similar question, and he didn't really answer it then. But I wanted to ask him again to see, we're getting closer, polls are getting tighter, is he going to wade into it? I asked him once directly, do you support it? I followed back up and gave him another 60 seconds, and then I asked him one more time, because it was clear at this point. In my follow-ups, I usually say, candidate, you did not answer the question. I say it out loud, as a flag there, as a place marker for our viewers to, if they're waiting in and out of the conversation, they'll see it. And then I come back for the third time. I was going to give him one more chance. And I said, I want to ask you one more time here. I want to give you another 60 seconds. Why won't you answer this question on abortion? Yeah. And it was obvious he didn't want to answer if you saw the debate. That was the very first question. No. And he said, I brought up 4 or 5 things here. Why didn't you ask Congressman Allred about what I just brought up? And I think at that point it becomes clear, regardless of whoever we're talking to, if someone doesn't want to answer the question, the viewer can tell that person doesn't want to talk about the issue.
Yeah. I thought it was, a fair way to do it, to just, if you are honing in on, I asked you a yes or no question, do you want to answer it? That's, I think it's simplicity is oftentimes, I think, a lost art, especially as you get to the national level and you have these very, very well-watched debates where I think there's been a little bit, the freelancing that happens is, I think it's just detrimental to the conversation and to the product. Let's talk about this race specifically, because obviously it's something that you have followed and covered. What is your thoughts on what are your thoughts on Colin Allred's challenge to Ted Cruz? Obviously, he's running an uphill battle, but how has he run compared to, let's say, a Beto O'Rourke 6 years ago?
Yeah, I would say the headline here for the answer to that question is this is Ted Cruz's race to lose. At the end of the day, Cruz has been leading the polls on this slightly. It's been in the margin of error, but Cruz is still leading by a few points, and I think that's how it's going to end up, by a few points, likely in Cruz's favor. If it doesn't, that's going to be seismic in Texas and nationally. Mm-hmm. But here's what I think is interesting with that question you posed. Colin Allred, this Dallas Democrat who is a congressman here in the northeast side of Dallas, he has run what is essentially a stealth campaign. He's out there. He has these, he doesn't have these massive rallies like Beto O'Rourke does. He has these events here, there, and everywhere. He's all over the state. He should be. He's running for the statewide office. But he's not the same dynamic candidate that we saw 6 years ago with Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke was this electric figure. He still is. Great guy. He was skateboarding through the drive-through at Whataburger. That's who Beto O'Rourke is, and he immediately, had this massive following of brand new young voters, and that shook Republicans to their core. They're like, oh my God, how's this happening? Still, though, Allred has been able to outraise Beto O'Rourke, and O'Rourke shattered records. Now Allred's shattering those records. How's he doing that by running a stealth campaign? I think this says 2 things. Number one, Democrats think that Cruz is vulnerable, but number 2, Cruz, I don't want to be overly critical of Cruz here, because he's been successful. He's been elected twice. He's leading in his 3rd term, potentially for Senate. But Cruz has high unfavorables when you poll him. Mm-hmm. So people either love Cruz or they hate Cruz. Now Allred is one of those individuals where I think the most recent poll from the UT Politics Project in Austin said that there are 30% of the electorate, likely voters, who don't have an opinion of Allred. So it's fascinating, because Beto was this great, bigger than life figure for Democrats, and Allred's kind of the opposite of that. Still a dynamic guy. He's former NFL player, raised by the bootstraps by all accounts type of guy.
Great story.
But he's outraising Cruz on this. It's a wild campaign to see, but at the end of the day, this is a Republican state. This is Cruz's race to lose, and I don't see that Cruz is going to lose this race right now. What happened on Tuesday night in Dallas, this debate, though, certainly, I think, shook things up in this race.
Well, I'll tell you how he raises that much money, because I moved to this fine state 3 years ago. Previous to that, I was in the Bay Area, and I will tell you this, I saw a lot more Beto O'Rourke signs in my neighborhood than I ever saw for a California politician. Standing across the stage from Ted Cruz is an extraordinarily profitable position to be in, because Ted Cruz has such probably the most famous Republican senator if you look at the amount of coverage that he gets, and has historically, like you mentioned, run behind even other Texas politicians from the Republican Party. There is a very love-hate relationship that people have with him, and yet I very much agree with you. It would be a real shock. And also, this debate, I think, meant more for Allred than it did for Cruz. Cruz has been up there. Again, he's kind of a known quantity. A lot of people were meeting Colin Allred for the first time. From my vantage point, it seemed like, he wasn't quite, the most calm that he's ever been. He wasn't quite the most measured that I think that he's ever been. There was some very, very bright lights for him, but he did deliver the supply closet line, and that kind of went viral. When you're doing these debates, how you mentioned that you had become a meme in the past, how aware are you in the moment that, oh, that's going to be something that people take away? Or are you just as surprised as anybody when you open up your Twitter account?
How aware am I? At one point, we got lost in this debate, man. I don't know if you saw it, but about halfway through, my colleague Gromer was asking a question, and he got lost on time. And we did, 90 seconds to answer a question.
Yeah.
The other guy gets 90 seconds to respond. And we forgot about going back to Cruz for that 60 seconds. And so I thought it was my time to move ahead, and Gromer did too. And he said, no, I'll get the time back. I think I can tell, just as somebody who's been doing this for a minute, and Gromer can too, my colleague from the Dallas Morning News, when something is said that's going to take off. The other, I think probably the most powerful moment I thought in there was the January 6th question. Mm-hmm. And this came right after the transgender issue that Allred didn't want to talk about, that we put in the middle of the debate. But the January 6th question comes up, and I knew that'd be something that Allred would want to, go after Cruz on. And he starts talking about the supply closet and things like that. And Cruz looks over at one point and just smiles. And that's when Allred delivers the line that I think was kind of the most sobering there. He says, look, this is not funny. This is not funny. You're a threat to democracy. And I was like, wow. I think for me, for people who don't realize this, debates and even politics are a sport.
Yes.
In this today's political climate, they're like, cutthroat. The other guy's got to lose. This is a sport at the end of the day. And Ted Cruz is an excellent debater. He's a fantastic debater. It's why he is where he is. But that was a sobering moment in there, because I think that really kind of cut through the sport of debate. That's when I could tell that Allred, I expected Allred to come into this debate, Justin, being the quieter type guy. He's sure of himself, obviously, but he's been mild-mannered. Allred, I think, why this debate really kind of blew up is that Allred was not intimidated by Ted Cruz.
No,
I did not expect that. I don't know. I don't think my colleagues expected that. People know Ted Cruz is a fantastic debater. He has a command of the facts. He's confident when he gets behind the lectern. He knows how to go for the jugular in a debate, and he does that very well all the time. And we expected that to happen this time. Allred stood up to him, and we could tell that in the opening statements, the 60 seconds out of the gate when this thing began.
Yeah, and he is the one that needs to introduce himself, right? He is, sure. especially nationally. There's a lot of people now that are talking about Colin Allred. I saw him on the cable news doing hits in a way that he probably wouldn't have otherwise. But at the same time, and I do believe that January 6th answer was very powerful. I'm curious your opinion for Texas voters. Obviously, it's a character hit on Cruz, and like we mentioned, he's somebody that has a love-hate relationship with the electorate. But how much do you believe, the threats to democracy as it's polled as, how many of those voters are in Texas that weren't already voting for Democrat already?
Yeah, and I have a conversation with my brother-in-law about this all the time. I'm sure your audience knows this immensely, but the people who decide elections are not Republicans, they're not Democrats, they're the folks in the middle. The folks in the middle decide every single election, period. Now, the folks in the middle, as you probably realize in the state after living here for a minute, is they lean a little more Republican in this state. But I think at the end of the day, this is and was the largest audience of Texans that either man was going to get this election cycle.
Yeah.
It was on 25 stations. There was a TV station in Louisiana that wanted to air this, and we were like, Louisiana? But it's in Shreveport, Louisiana, Northeast Louisiana. I mean, they have a massive audience in East Texas and Northeast Texas as well. But that was kind of a marker for us to really realize how big of a deal this is. In 2018, we didn't have that many. I think we had 12 or 15 stations that were simultaneously rebroadcast.
Oh, wow. So this one had a bigger footprint than the Beto debate.
100%. It was on C-SPAN. It was on the radio in North Texas. We purposely didn't let a few national outlets have it because we wanted this to be a Texas debate. But we were on in every single corner of the state. That wasn't the same as the Beto debate. So considering that, this was the largest audience that these guys were going to have to be face-to-face. Allred's met Cruz before, but they had never been in front of cameras like they were for this debate.
Let me ask you again. I'm going to hold you to this. How many how many threats to democracy voters do you think are persuadable, though? Or is that a salient issue? Because I wonder that in this election, obviously it was more than people thought there was going to be in 2022, or at least Republicans didn't believe that there were a lot of people that were going to vote because they believed that democracy was on the ballot. That surprised them then. I wonder in 2024, especially in a state like Texas, how salient January 6th is, aside from it being a character judgment on Cruz.
Yeah, I think that it is probably more important this cycle because this is the first time Trump is back on the top of the ticket. So when we go vote, you're going to see Trump, Harris, and then you'll see Allred and Cruz on there. So because of that alone, I think that's one of the reasons that Democrats especially are really trying to drive this home. 6 years ago, it wasn't an issue at all. Trump hadn't happened yet. January 6, 2021 hadn't happened yet. But it's happened now, and I think Democrats are really trying to tie Cruz to that. How many are persuadable? I mean, there are 30% of the people who don't have an opinion. 30% of Texans don't have an opinion of Colin Allred. Do they now, after what happened Tuesday night? Who knows? Do they now because of the points that Allred made about January 6th, about the supply closet, about, and Liz Cheney tweeting these things out, all these tweets going viral, these X posts that are out there. I think if there was going to be a cycle where the democracy issue was on the line, I think this is the cycle.
I would agree that this is probably where it's going to be at the high point for a Ted Cruz race. There's no doubt about that. But that is not where a lot of the ads have come in, at least the ones that I've seen. If you've been watching football over the last few Saturdays and Sundays, it is pretty well dominated with Ted Cruz ads, and they are almost universally about transgender issues. This is something that is also happening nationally in the Trump-Harris race. Is the just blanketing of that issue something that you find surprising, or is it just a sign of our politics these days?
Oh, it's not surprising at all. I mean, again, that Republicans have been so successful in this state, and I think nationally, because they're calculated. They know what strikes to the core of people who are living in Omaha, Nebraska, who are living in suburbs in Houston, all over the place. Again, this is a sport. Now, keep in mind, people don't see it as a sport, but this is a sport. The border scares the hell out of a lot of people. Yeah. There's another group of people who's like, I get it. We need people to come into this country. They've always come into this country. Transgender, tiny population here in Texas, but it scares the hell out of people who don't know any trans people, and that frightens folks. Republicans realize that, and Republicans purposely do that. Now, I think if you're looking just the basics of this, I think Cruz has a great attack line against against Colin Allred. The Republican bill last year, the protection of women and girls protection of women and girls in sports, makes a good point. And the bill, I think it was a pretty clean bill. I didn't read the actual text. I looked at the one sheet before I came in here. And the one sheet says essentially, look, Title IX was these federal regulations that said women have got to have their own sports, girls have got to have their own sports, and if you're taking any federal money,
you have to
abide by this.
Yeah,
exactly. You have to abide by this. And so the Republicans put that back up, and Democrats, it was a down the line vote. Republicans and Democrats split on it, and that's the vote. It was put up for this reason, for this cycle. That's the reason it was put up. Democrats do the same thing, but Republicans put it up for this cycle, so they knew how Democrats were going to vote. They're going to vote against it. So Democrats voted against it on their disciplined beliefs, and Republicans said, look, why aren't you protecting girls? Cruz is like, I'm a father of two girls. I don't want my girls to be in volleyball. I think he said and have a bigger individual, a trans person spike the ball on my girl who's a smaller individual. Republicans realize this is one of the things that strikes to the core of a lot of folks who just don't know trans people. On the opposite side, look at abortion. It's the same thing for Democrats. At the end of the day, I wish people would realize that politics is a sport. Everybody take a breath, take it easy. The sun's going to rise tomorrow. We're all going to be okay. So just realize it is what it is. Now, I understand things have changed since January 6, 2021, but I think everyone probably should back it off a little bit. But I think that's the mechanics behind a lot of this. Is that people? I wish people understood that more. That's why a lot of bills go for a vote. In both
messaging
houses.
Bills, yeah,
Dude,
yeah, absolutely.
100%.
That's what. We're seeing a lot of this on the national level as well, obviously, along with the throughout a lot of these Senate races. Yeah, I think the benefit of the Cruz campaign, number one, they probably have the top two issues that in general Texas voters are going to be polling on, which is the border and the economy. The Republicans tend to have the advantage in those two areas. I would say, from Allred's perspective, that his strongest position would be abortion. Unfortunately for him, this is a federal office, and it's not going to have the same salience as, let's say, the next person that runs for governor as a Democrat in Texas will have in terms of the statewide issue. But as for the transgender stuff, I think the Republicans found a pretty clean message of keep boys out of girls' sports. If that is your one sentence, that does not sound bigoted. It does not sound hateful. It sounds like a thing that should happen, and that's always the cleanest way that you want to politically message.
I'll tell you another one real quick, not to interrupt you, but build the wall. It's a simple one. It's simple, and people who are watching cable news might think there's an absolute invasion happening along the Rio Grande. The numbers have been falling for this entire fiscal year down there. And it's a simple thing that fentanyl's coming across. Yes, it is coming across. And there's a lot of other things coming across. There are things going south of the border that shouldn't be going south of the border as well. So the border is a two-way street. There's a lot of messaging that Republicans have understood. They have, they have AM radio. They dominate cable news. They have now Twitter, X. So they have a lot of ways to get their message out. Democrats' problem has always been messaging, in my opinion. In 92, they had this great message. In 96 with Bill Clinton. Now, let's build a bridge to the 21st century. Let's
don't stop thinking about tomorrow.
Absolutely. That song played a million times when I was waiting for Clinton to come out. He was interviewing Ted Koppel on the stage in Little Rock that night when he won. And then 2008, hope. I mean, you can't get simpler than those four letters.
Four letters.
And after the two wars that we were in the middle of with George W. Bush, brilliant. It was brilliant. Yeah. And then I think Kamala's message right now, forward, we're not going back. Tremendous messaging there. But I think the Democrats, I know Democrats don't fall in line like Republicans do. And whether that goes back to the Republican messaging machine, which is AM radio, cable news, social media, et cetera, or it's just maybe who people are. I don't know, but Democrats have always kind of been a little bit wilder, bigger tent, I think. And they don't line up as easily as Republicans do.
I'll tell you what, though, I almost feel like through the Trump years that polarity has shifted a bit. I don't know if it's fully flipped, but I know that right now there's a Democratic ticket that has, it's hugging Dick Cheney, which, as somebody who went to college in the aughts, that's something I don't think I'd ever see in my entire life, is the Democratic nominee for president lauding the history of leadership of Dick Cheney.
He was called Darth Vader. Remember that?
I mean, I lived it, brother. I lived it. Again, I was going to college during the aughts. This is. I mean, like, I can't imagine. He left office with a lower approval rating than George W. Bush, who had the lowest approval rating that a president had left office with in a very long time. Like, this is. I mean, it just shows you how fast things shift. That Liz Cheney's on the other side of the Trump issue, and now all of a sudden, Dick Cheney's a great American.
It's unbelievable. I mean, when we're watching this in the newsroom behind me here, our minds are just like blowing up. And then here's what cracks me up: for Republicans to say, "Oh, they're rhinos. These guys aren't conservatives." Yeah. Are you kidding me? These guys are the most hardcore conservatives. They don't like the conservative candidate for president right now, but they are the most hardcore conservatives out there. They don't agree on a lot of things. They just agree on who they think should not be the Republican presidential nominee right now.
It's fascinating to see the coalitions shift, and I wonder by the time that all the votes are counted after Election Day where it's actually going to even out. But you're seeing it a lot in Texas. Texas is a blue trending state at the very least, even though it is still solidly Republican, and a lot of it comes from the suburbs of the major metropolitan areas. And yet you have what was thought to be 10 years ago, 12 years ago, the bedrock strength of the Democratic coalition, some of the Latino voters down in those border towns that are trending redder and redder. I think it was like a 30-point swing in 2020. Are there any other demographic shifts that you have kept your eye on in terms of what the universe of voters looks like in Texas?
I think two things are happening. I'll start with the current one right now. It happened last cycle too. The abortion issue right now especially is really impacting suburban women.
Yes.
These are women who live in Williamson County, who live in Collin County, dare I say, Tarrant County, Fort Bend County outside Houston, Montgomery County, places like that. They have traditionally been conservative voters. They vote maybe like their husbands do or their dads did. But the abortion issue is really where the fight is right now. And Democrats see that opportunity. So Democrats think that they can break into those red enclaves right now and get some of those women to start voting blue. That's where they're going after. Republicans, again, calculated. These guys look at data. They look at numbers. Super smart campaign people here. They see that in the Valley, as you mentioned, the Rio Grande Valley, South Texas, places like Laredo, Brownsville, Harlingen, McAllen, South Padre, that Latinos who live there have traditionally voted Democrat, but they're conservative. They don't agree with Democrats on the abortion issue. So Republicans see inroads right there. The GOP, the Republican National Committee, as you probably have talked about on the podcast here, has invested money in places down there. They've opened community centers in McAllen. They opened a community center here in Coppell in North Texas, in Dallas County. Again, these are smart moves. We're here. Just come meet us. Just come meet us. Find out what we're about. We're not the evil people you think we are.
Nationally, there was a friend of mine on Twitter who's like, oh, the Trump campaign is registering voters on the campus of Penn State at a Penn State football game. It's like, are they stupid? And in any other election, you'd think, yeah, they are. Why on earth would you be making sure that young people would vote? They vote against you in an historic margin. They probably will certainly vote against them in this election, but maybe not the ones that go to the Penn State football game, and that's where they were registering voters. And that's we're just seeing. I guess here's my last question. From a stat counting perspective, it seems like one of the theories of this election is that the new way that we're just going to look at all these issues, as you mentioned with abortion, is not on education. It's not really even on age. It's on gender. Men are voting more conservatively and women are voting more liberally. Is that something that you see, at least in how these campaigns are behaving for this race, Allred versus Cruz?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look at the Harris campaign right now. Kamala Harris's campaign is a little startled right now about the data on black men. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've talked about it here, but there were more black men voting for Biden 4 years ago than are voting for Harris today. That's a problem for the Harris campaign. They've got to get a handle on that. They're trying to get a handle on that. Will they? They don't have much time. I mean, early voting starts here in Texas. The clock's ticking on this thing. Early voting starts Monday in Texas. So can they do that? I mean, at the end of the day, here's the thing that I have trouble reconciling in my mind. And I may be proven wrong. I've been proven wrong plenty of times. But I don't – going back to 2020, Donald Trump lost that election. I don't see how Trump is going to change the mind of people who voted against him the first time, or Republicans who skipped that spot on the that spot on the ballot and moved on down. I just don't see why that they would vote against him then, and then all the things that have happened, the criminal charges, January 6th, everything else, and then say, oh, okay, well, I can forgive why I didn't like him in 2020, plus all this other stuff, and vote for him now. Maybe the polls are spot on about this. Maybe Trump wins, but I think that I don't know. I just have trouble seeing how that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the crazy thing is that we've had so much happen in between, right? We saw Donald Trump. I mean, number one, let's all remember before in that election. This is pre-January 6th, obviously. It was about COVID. It was about his leadership during COVID and him being unsuited for that. Then you have January 6th. Then you have him kind of as a weakened candidate because of the midterms. Then the charges come in. He becomes rejuvenated as the Republicans sort of rally around the flag there. And he essentially beats Biden because Biden has to pull out of the race by the fiat of his own party. And now we're here in a pure toss-up race. And although it would be a great night for Kamala Harris if Texas is blue, I think if it is bluer than 2020, that the Democratic Party would take that as a win.
Absolutely would. And you mentioned that Texas is becoming bluer. We always kind of joke that, it's next cycle will happen. We've been saying it for 25 years in Texas. I mean, it's not. That's my joke with my Democratic friends. Like, come on, dude, stop saying that. But that's one of the other things we're watching. We're watching a few things for the election night coming up in 3 weeks here. One of the things is, though, how close will Harris get to Trump in this state? I believe Trump beat Biden by 5 or 6 points in Texas 4 years ago. Will that number continue to trend down? The polls say no, maybe not right now, which is interesting. A lot of people I talk to say they think it's going to be 5 to 8 points that Trump wins in Texas.
So it'll widen out, yeah.
Which that's a problem for Democrats. That's a huge problem for Democrats. They've made all these gains leading up to this point, and if that widens out, Democrats have plenty of problems. Stack this one on top as the latest problem, because it all comes down to Texas, as you know. Republicans have to have Texas to win the White House. If Republicans lose Texas, they'll never win the White House again.
Big problem.
That's why Texas is so important.
Yeah. Well, somebody that you can always count on for the pulse of Texas politics is Jason Whitley, our guest, the host of Inside Texas Politics, and of course the senior political reporter at WFAA in Dallas. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us.
Yeah, good conversation, man. Thanks for having me, Justin.
This is your update brought to you by politicspoliticspoditics.com. The domain name works. It's also takepoliticsseriously.com. However you want to get to our brand new Substack, friends, please get there. That thing we did up at the top, that came through our Substack chat. Substack's got a great little chat system that has been awesome. You know, we had a little conversation when the Kamala Harris interview was taking place, and we were talking about this first story that we're going to go over with Sinwar, but we are currently at 54% conversion from Patreon to Substack. Thank you to everybody who has done it. I'm about to start sending out emails to anybody who's been comped that has not taken advantage of it, at least as of yet. But if you were a patron and you don't have the access to the bonus episodes, then please, please, please let me know. Also, if you have any problems with your feed on Substack, email me, theyoungamerican@gmail.com. I'll get you in touch with the Substack people. They will work everything out for you. A reminder that until Halloween, we are doing an annual deal on all of our bonus episodes, 150 episodes of politics for less than $100, $99 until Halloween is when that special is going to run. So please head over there, take advantage of it if you would like to support this show and just lock in your year right now. Because as we're about to find out in our narrative draft with Ryan and Evan, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to probably be able to chew on, even after all the votes are counted. So head on over there, takepoliticsseriously.com. Let's get into some big news here. I mean, in another world, this would have been the A block. Israeli forces have killed, now confirmed, Hamas leader Yaya Sinwar in Gaza. He is a major figure, obviously, who is responsible for orchestrating the deadly attack on Israel on October 7th. The Israeli military confirmed that Sinwar was found after a battle in Rafah. His death is seen as a significant blow to Hamas. He was, at the time of his death, the leader of both the political and military arms of Hamas. And the victory is not just symbolic. It is something that is going to affect the ceasefire negotiations, which one might assume would be something that would ramp up from this point. What we don't know about Hamas is who's going to take over. The two people that are most likely actually get their patronage from different parts of the Arab world. One of them from Turkey, one of them from Iran. But Iran is losing trusted proxies in this region. And in my opinion, there was never going to be an Israeli ceasefire until Sinwar was dead. And I mean dead, not captured, not exiled. They were never going to allow him to live after he perpetrated October 7th. That just wasn't going to happen. Nobody involved in that government would be allowed to be in Israel if they let Sinwar crow about how he had killed that many Jews and they couldn't kill him. It's a rough neighborhood over there, but that is just the reality of it. I do have optimism that now is the time for some kind of deal, mostly because the Hamas leadership that would be negotiating now are actually in charge of things. When you had Hamas leadership in Doha that was a part of these ceasefire talks, nothing that they promised any of the sides really believed that Sinwar would carry out. And now he is not a part of it anymore. We're in a delicate moment as I speak to you, which is at 5:45 p.m. Central Time on Thursday. We don't know whether or not Hamas will just kill all the rest of the hostages that they have. We don't know if this is the time to strike a hostage deal, and by the time that you listen to this, there might have been some movement on it. Benjamin Netanyahu came out and said that the war is not over yet, but that this was a significant step forward. And it caps off a truly efficient run of taking out heads of the organizations that have tormented Israel, Hamas and Hezbollah specifically, over the last month and a half. We have compared it to the end of The Godfather in the way that people are getting taken out. So there we go. I sincerely hope that this is the beginning of the end of this phase, this truly bloody phase of that region. And let's hope. Let's hope. As far as it relates to American politics, you would assume that this is better, as it seems more on a glide path to have some kind of resolution now. The concept of a ceasefire on paper is now feasible before November 5th. And so Kamala Harris wants that. The question is that cake already baked? Is there anything that can happen that would make people that are upset with Kamala Harris, either from the Jewish side or from the Arab side, that will change anything? Or has that ship already sailed? We will find out. We got some messy business happening in Arizona. The Democratic Senate candidate Ruben Gallego's divorce records with his ex-wife, Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego, have been unsealed, revealing the reasons for their split. The record contains no allegation of abuse or infidelity. This is something that Kari Lake, her Gallego's opponent, had been suggesting would be a part of it. The couple opposed the unsealing to protect their son's privacy, but a court declined their request. The divorce file, which includes custody and asset arrangements, was described by the judge as routine. Both Gallegos condemned Lake for her remarks and reiterated their focus on their son's well-being in a joint statement. I've been waiting for this to become a part of that race for a long time. Number one, because Kari Lake is very messy. And number two, because it was a really messy situation with two fairly prominent Democratic politicians in Arizona. Ruben Gallego, obviously a rising star, somebody who by the polling seems to be on track to become a senator from Arizona. And there was a hasty divorce from his wife, who is the current mayor of Phoenix. So Gallego left his first wife right before their son was born and got together with a lobbyist. Very shortly after that, officially, they had a child after that in July of last year. Obviously, personal lives are something that's just going to come out in politics. I always thought that this was too big of an elephant in the room to not rear its head at some point. Will it have any effect on the race? We don't know. Again, this is a weird one because Kari Lake, you would think, in another world, if you had no idea who Kari Lake was in the past, she was a television anchor. She should be able to at least stem some of the tide with suburban women. That has been the crux of Republican weakness in Arizona and other states. But she is not able to. She has been very inflammatory to people that those women tended to like, including John and Sidney McCain. So Gallego now becomes the standard bearer there, especially since he's going to be the champion for abortion, but will highlighting the fact and bringing back up that Gallego left his pregnant wife to go with a lobbyist. Is that something that could depress the turnout? I don't know. As you're about to hear in our narrative draft, I am not a believer in ticket splitting in general, except in that race. I am a believer in ticket splitting in that race, just specifically because of how much damage Kari Lake has done with that Republican electorate. The Republican Party of Arizona is an absolute tire fire, and she's been a big part of the reason why. And finally, Vice President Kamala Harris's interview with Fox News anchor Bret Baier attracted 7.1 million viewers, including 882,000 in the key 25 to 54 age demographic, according to Nielsen. The interview lasted less than 30 minutes, but obviously dominated the news cycle. Meanwhile, Donald Trump did a town hall on Fox that aired at 11, and that drew under 3 million viewers. But that's gigantic for 11 a.m. in the morning. A lot of eyes on that interview. 7 million. Holy smokes. That wasn't prime time. That happened at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Barely happy hour. That's 7.1 million people watch that interview. If you want my full thoughts on that I recorded immediately after it was done, you can get our bonus episode. By the way, you get 2 bonus episodes each and every week if you subscribe to us at takepoliticsseriously.com, our brand new Substack. And guys, you're going to want it now. Now's the time to do it. Now, all right? Because things are happening constantly. We went, I think, an hour and 30 minutes on the Sunday edition. We had our big immediate reaction that came out as soon as that interview was over. Folks, come on. Cheapest that it's ever been offered. $99. 150 episodes of PX3 over the next year for less than $100. I mean, I'm trying to make it easy for you guys. Head on over there. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. And now, our narrative draft. All right, folks, this is something that we've been looking forward to doing for the last few weeks. We know enough of the building blocks of this election that I believe we can start to look forward to what the narratives are going to be in the weeks afterward. And how can we best do that? Well, in draft form, of course. And so I want to welcome Evan Scrimshaw, who's now a regular on the show. I think you've been on the show for the last 3 weeks, Scrim. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, man. Always love doing this.
And then, of course, Ryan Jakubowski of Understand Politics on YouTube. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back on the show.
Okay. I'm going to start it off. It's my draft, so I get the first pick. And I think that I'm probably going to take the first off the board, I think, on a lot of people's lists. And we're not doing any categories for Trump winning or Kamala winning, so this is part of it. But I'm going to take shoulda picked Shapiro off the board. I think that is going to be a immediate gut check thing, especially because I believe part of the narrative is going to be formed through the drama of election night. If this is close, and I assume that it is going to be by all available data, and if for whatever reason Donald Trump comes ahead in Pennsylvania, I think that it's going to be very hard, especially after that vice presidential debate, to not say we should have picked the guy who's like 25% popular in the state that we really needed to win, especially considering that the Kamala Harris ticket didn't wind up going left, which was part of the reason why initially you would want to pick Tim Walz. What do you guys think?
That was literally going to be my first pick. So, I know I wasn't going to get the 101, but I'm a little disappointed in that one. Yeah, I totally think this. I also just to kind of add on to what you said there, right? Like, I think Democrats are obviously understandably very nervous about this. If we're going to be seeing this narrative, not even after the election, they're going to be seeing it after every vote comes in Pennsylvania, when people are going to start overreacting to Harris doing 2% worse in Beaver County, but 1.5% better in Montgomery, right? We're going to be seeing it everywhere. So this is, I think, the clear 101.
Well, so I actually totally appreciate you stealing 101, but not taking my 101. I think I'm the biggest Kamala optimist on this panel, so therefore I think I don't think the Shapiro miss is going to matter as much. But the polls in Pennsylvania have been fairly robust for Kamala. I think the it's Pennsylvania or the nation is going to be slightly overstated, and I certainly think that Kamala now has losing scenarios that she didn't have 2 months ago while winning Pennsylvania, because Wisconsin polling has gotten way worse for now. I think that's just mostly reverting to normalcy after a very weirdly strong period. But I think she has more losing scenarios while winning Pennsylvania. That's not my 101. I don't know which of our guests get 102, but you get the second pick, Scrim. The polls are going to be wrong, and no one's going to care because the polls are going to underestimate Kamala Harris.
Thank you guys so much for taking my first 2 picks. Really good stuff, guys.
So there's 2 cases to this. One,
so flood the zone too.
So it's partially flood the zone, right? The combination of the number of right-wing pollsters that are in the field, the number of Democratic pollsters who aren't in the field, right? Change Research barely releasing, Global Strategies Group, GSG, BSG, like a bunch of the polls that were so wrong in 2020. Data for Progress has been substantially revamped and barely releasing. A lot of the pollsters that really led to the true terribleness of the 2020 polls not in the field anymore. You have these right-wing pollsters who are now taking up significantly greater portions of polling averages because of how quote unquote right they were or lucky they were in 2020. But so that's it. The media pollsters have mostly fixed their problems, or at the very least have made substantial changes that suggest that they have fixed their problems. And the other thing is there is no international circumstance where a party has been underestimated 3 straight times in the polls. It is far more likely, based on all international evidence, that the polls are going to flip their bias. And I cannot stop thinking about the 2017 British election. Every Tory was like, the polls don't look great. The lead's slipping away, but the polls underestimated last time, so we'll still win a majority of 100. And then Jeremy Corbyn took Theresa May to the verge of losing the election outright and lost her majority. And I think absolutely Republicans are walking into the same trap of hand-waving away very legitimate concerns about their campaign under the guise of, but the polls. And Kamala's going to win by 5 points, going to win comfortably on the night, and we're all going to be, Democrats are going to be too happy, celebrating and dancing in the streets to care that the polls were wrong.
Ryan, what do you think about them?
Ooh, I mean, that was going to be like the Shapiro pick was, I think, the 101 here. That was my 102. I was just going to add on one more thing, which is that like a big part, I think, and Evan touched on this, right, in the sense that like a lot of the really bad 2020 polls are no longer like in the field, and they're not like the bad, the right-wing pollsters are making up exceedingly, large portions of like the pool of the polls, right? Another thing I think is that the pandemic really exacerbated the over, like this inflation of Democratic support in polling data, I think, because a lot of Democrats are at home and more likely responding to polls than Republicans, especially as we got closer to the election.
Can I interrogate that a little bit? Because I think there's a lot of people that have said that outright as if we all know it for a fact. And I don't know if I'm convinced by it. I think that there might be, it is at least equally likely to me that there is just a systemic problem where conservatives do not want to take polls right now, right? And whether or not that means that it is just an increasing problem with distrust in systems, but they just don't want to do it, as there is this very clean narrative that very much comes from a liberal perspective of, well, we were being safe at home and therefore bored, and so we answered our phones, where the Republicans were out partying at the one Ruby Tuesdays that was open and not answering their phones. It at least seems equally likely that it's just, no, there is a problem with tracking down Republicans these days for polls, and it was exacerbated by it in 2020, but there's no reason to say that it's not going to be another problem here.
There is actually a case for it, which is to say that of the big 7 swing states, the four states with the biggest polling errors in 2020, those 4 states were the 4 states that had Democratic governors in 2020, and the 3 states with the 2 of the 3 states with the smallest miss were the ones governed by Republicans.
Yeah, I also just want to say, like, I think both can be true at the same time, right? I don't think anyone on this panel would deny, like, the existence of, like, that very fundamental systemic, like, fact, like, the polls aren't able to get the Republicans, and that conservatives are less likely to respond to polls. But I think I'm with Evan here, right? Or it's my take, really, but, like, I think Evan and I are in agreement that, like, I think the pandemic definitely exacerbated this.
Yeah, I don't, it's not that I don't buy it. I just think that it's being stated like fact in a way that I don't know. I think that we might be walking into another assumption that if it repeats again, then we're going to be like, oh, okay, well, maybe it wasn't just because liberals were home.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right, my turn.
No, it's Ryan's 1-0.
Oh, it's Ryan's turn. Because we took his top 2. Ryan, go ahead.
Well, big thanks to Evan for sticking up for me today. Just kidding. No, okay. So my pick is going to be the post-election narrative we're going to see, especially with regards to the Electoral College map, is going to be we were looking at the Sun Belt wrong all along, and that it was very obvious. So I think that the conventional wisdom has started to shift back away from Harris winning North Carolina. I genuinely don't know where you guys stand on North Carolina right now. I believe Trump's going to win.
I never bought it. I never bought Harris as North Carolina. It's always rosy in the late summer, and then it closes red in the fall every single time.
Yes. No, it's consistent. I completely agree with that. So my take is that that's half of it, is that not only was North Carolina always going to vote for Trump by the same 1 to 2 point GOP margin, but that at the same time we were wrong with Arizona, and that Arizona is going to be bluer than North Carolina, potentially outright, I think, go for Harris. And I say that for a couple of reasons, just to kind of go quickly here. The polling in North Carolina historically, and when I say historically, we mean just the past few cycles, has been better for Republicans, obviously, or the polling error has been better for Republicans than it has in Arizona. I checked this. Of the 8 states with the big competitive Senate races in the midterms, North Carolina had the smallest polling error that favored Democrats, where Sherry Beasley essentially matched her polls. She outran by under a point compared to, the bigger polling misses we saw in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, et cetera. That's not all that impressive. And then Arizona, on the other hand, I think the geography there is better for Democrats. Maricopa County, I think, could cast 62 to 63% of the votes, which would be up from the 61% it cast in 2020. That's a left-trending area. You have a lot that I think the Harris campaign has been uniquely tailored, especially like you brought it, how they're running a more moderate campaign. I think it's been tailored to these suburban voters. You see the ads with former Republicans saying, look, we're voting for Harris, country over party. You have the fact that the abortion referendum's on the ballot. I think just the factors in Arizona are lining up better for Harris than they are in North Carolina, and by a good amount. I don't think that there's going to be too much. I don't think these states are going to vote very close together at all. If I had to pick, I think Arizona's a pure toss, but I could see the case for either party. In North Carolina, I like Trump by 2 points.
I think
Ryan, if Arizona goes for Harris, do you see a world where Nevada goes for Trump? Because I don't.
If you asked me that 2 months ago, I would have said yeah. But the polling in Nevada has gotten quite good for Harris, and that even Trafalgar and like the other GOP polls are having her up now. I'm not sure. To be honest, Nevada's the state that I feel could like have the widest range of outcomes. So I would say no, but like I also feel the least confident about like my Nevada takes in general, but in terms of like the 7 swing states as a whole.
Until I see Ralston getting chesty, I don't think that. I mean, like I will always consistently be like, I don't know. He's been squirrely about Trump support there for the last year, and so I tend to buy it. Scrim?
That's true.
I agree that North Carolina has never made sense to be the bluest of those 3 states. It has the least left-trending areas. It has the least, it's more white than Georgia. I thought you were gonna say that Georgia is gonna vote for Harris. I thought that was gonna be your hot take, because that spoiler might be coming up soon for me. I agree on Arizona. I think the left trends. I think Maricopa are fine. The Hispanic polling is up in the air. It depends on which of the Hispanic only polls you use, but even still, Democrats. Left trend should be enough to propel whatever losses we get with Hispanics. And frankly, the polling in Arizona just doesn't pass the basic smell test, because, a lot of the narrative around Arizona being gone has been impacted by basically 2 New York Times Siena polls and 1 Suffolk. And the thing about the Times Siena was that in 2018, they were very, very bad at polling Hispanics. They screwed up a few Texas district polls that made those seats look really uncompetitive, and then Democrats beat their polls by 5, 10, 15 points in some of those seats. Arizona's obviously not that Hispanic, but I do wonder if if the Times, in trying to fix their 2020 bias, is reinventing that 2018 bias of undershooting Democrats in Hispanic-heavy areas.
Yeah, the one thing that I forget which poll had this, but of all of the swing states had the economy as their number one issue, except for Arizona, where it was immigration. And that's where, if you're looking at what is the difference between the 2020 margin versus the 2024 margin, is that even those McCain Republicans that were propelling Democratic candidates might be in a hold your nose scenario for Trump. I don't think they're in a hold your nose scenario for Carrie Lake, but I think that would be my theory of the case there.
Makes sense.
Do we believe obviously, if out of the 7 swing states we do see immigration truly rise in salience, Arizona makes the most logical sense. Do we believe the magnitude of it though? Because I'm not sold on that yet.
I mean, if you look at how Ruben Gallego is running this race, and by all accounts he is up on Carrie Lake, he was picked to be the true blue progressive to knock out the wishy-washy moderate of Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten Sinema, by the way, somebody that probably looks at this electorate and says wait, why did I leave? Being the purple centrist is something that she would have had a lot more of a favorable situation in this particular race as an independent than she would have even as a Democrat before. But now Ruben Gallego is running as a border hawk. So yeah, I don't know. At least they believe it.
Yeah, but the thing is that Democrats are intentionally trying to they tend to overcorrect to solve a problem, whereas Republicans tend to undercorrect to solve a problem. And I also wonder how much of the Gallego keeps talking about immigration is just that's what the national media is the only time they pick up on him talking. I don't think as much of his sort of remarks or ads or whatever are about this, but that's what tends to go viral on Twitter because.
I mean, it's also what his team, I forget who, I think it was Dave Weigel. Dave Weigel, I think, did a thing where that's what they were talking about. They made sure that they put him there when he was talking about immigration from a Hispanic perspective as somebody who took it seriously. So I don't know. I mean, for whatever reason, they believe that this is a vulnerability at the very least. And they don't believe that they can win if they are painted as not taking the border seriously. And also, the margin was really thin last time. It was not a whole lot of votes.
No, it was 0.3%.
Yeah. All right. My pick. I'm going to be full. Nothing ever happens. I'm going to say that all the coalitional shifts that we've been discussing ad nauseum for the past year don't really come to pass. Donald Trump maybe moves up 1 nationally with black voters, maybe moves 3 or 4 with Hispanic voters, but everything that we've talked about, everything that we've polled for, much ado about nothing. The coalitions continue to hold.
I completely agree with this because the thing is, one, we do this every cycle to some extent, right?
Yes.
The Democrats, oh my God.
This is exceptional because we're playing with it a lot. There's a lot of movement that seems to be largely, I guess the theory is that we need to just look at things more specific, more fluid when it comes to race and more specifically pinned to gender. Gender is now the biggest binary that we should pay attention to.
Yeah, because the key thing is that it makes sense why some Hispanics and black voters might be appealing to Trump, but it's also the case that there's also a reason why disaffected ex-Republicans, suburbanites, global leap and realignment folks are going to do what they're going to do. And I think I've said many times on this show before, and definitely in writing and on the drafts I do with Ryan, this election to me has always been a sort of 2020 with a bit of trends, which means, something like 1 or 2 points up with black voters, a few points up with Hispanics, but he bleeds with white college educated. That makes the most sense. And in an election, if this is 2020 redux, the tipping point last time voted for Biden by, just over 0.6 of a point. So minor shifts could move the election, but this is not going to be a radical redrawing of the map.
I mean,
Sorry, Ryan.
No, so I was going to say that I don't think we're necessarily. I think we're all in agreement that no one here thinks that the magnitude of the shifts we're going to see on election night are going to be reflective of those we're seeing in the polls. I do think it's going to matter in terms of where it happens, obviously, because especially with Hispanic voters, we saw in 2020 the swings in favor of Trump were bigger in, say, South Texas and South Florida than they were in neighboring New Mexico or in California, right? So I think nationally we can I'm with you that it's maybe only a 2, 3, 4 point swing towards Trump with Hispanic voters. What matters obviously is whether it's in Arizona or in Nevada or in Texas, and that's a thing that I would expect Harris to be concerned about, especially because she won Arizona by 10,000 votes. She won Nevada by 2.5 points, right? If we see a volatile shift happen, especially in Arizona, or even a 5-6 point swing with Hispanic voters, it's localized in the southern part of the state, that can be enough to really, really change the electoral college. So I guess I'm with Evan in the sense that because the election is going to be close across these swing states, it matters. But I really am just a big believer in how unpredictable this is going to be, because again, who could have predicted in 2020 that Trump was going to do 30 points better in some counties in South Texas? I think a lot of people thought he was going to do a little better with Hispanic voters because of the incumbency boost. I don't think anyone could have predicted the magnitude, and that's what concerns me, and that's why I'm so hesitant to have a strong take on this, I suppose.
All right, Scrim, who's your second rounder?
We're all idiots for not seeing Kamala winning Georgia happening. I don't understand the takes here. I really don't. It is one of the most left-turning states in the nation. It has a reliable black Democratic base that has proven itself both in terms of its ability to deliver huge margins for Democrats. Biden won black voters in the state by 86 per the AP Votecast. He got 92%. Trump only got 6. This is a coalition that delivered for Biden, and then for Ossoff and Warnock in the runoffs. Delivered for Warnock in the sense that if Georgia didn't have the stupid runoff rule, he would have won that Senate seat in 2022 on election night, and then delivered again in the midterms. And for some reason, we're buying all of these polls that have Harris outrunning Biden with black voters, or with white voters, underrunning him with black voters, and we're all just accepting that this is going to happen, and she must be down in Georgia. I'm sorry. A state that is moving as left as it is, with voters who we know in other places that look a lot like Cobb and Gwinnett and Forsyth and Cherokee, these white, well-off, socially liberal voters, we know from the Washington primary, from district polling, we know that these voters are moving left, from the number of Nikki Haley primary voters there are in all of these places, in all the demographically similar places. We know that this is happening. I'm sorry, you're just not convincing me that Donald Trump is going to win Georgia when black voters have been this consistent in that state, and she's going to win by 0.8%. It's going to look something like 2022 in a map, a bit more accelerated trends-wise, and we're all going to look at this and go, why did we doubt Georgia? Why did we doubt the suburbs? What was wrong with us?
Yeah, this is the first one that I don't know if I buy. I see your case. But I also think that Georgia is only a Democratic state when the Republican Party is really screwing up. And despite Donald Trump's best efforts, it does seem like the Kemp machine is behind them. They've got a really good ground game, and I do think that the I don't know. I think that Georgia's red unless the Republicans screw up, and I don't see them in that kind of situation like they had in 2020 with all the COVID stuff. Ryan?
I'm kind of between you guys. I believe Harris is underrated in Georgia. Her polling there is a bit worse than I think is going to be actually reflected on election night. I do agree with Justin though, Evan, that Georgia to me, I still view as a red state. I'm sorry. I know we love Georgia because of what it's done for the Democrats in the past couple of elections, but the Kemp machine matters. The fact that that Republicans have gotten burnt here multiple elections in a row matters in the sense that I think they're going to be able to run a better campaign this time. I also think the suburbs are going to move left just because of trends and because even in 2022 in the governor's race, we saw Stacey Abrams improve in her 2018 margins despite doing 6% worse statewide. That's all true. I don't know if it's enough to offset potential turnout drops in Atlanta. And we're also, I expect, going to see Trump do a bit better in the majority black rural counties, which essentially account for a congressional district, the southern part of the state. In a close state like Georgia, that does matter. It's a pure toss-up to me, but I think that structurally Republicans have a bit of an advantage in that way. So I'm kind of in between you guys. What I want to do is just wait and see some early vote. Is really before I have any firm Georgia takes. To be honest, that's why I didn't take it earlier, even though I know Evan was gonna.
He was going after
you. Taking Georgia from me, there would have been consequences.
Yeah, well, I mean, it worked out conveniently for me because it's a little early. It's a little early.
The counterpoint to this is that all of that is true, and if the suburbs keep doing what the suburbs are doing, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't know how much more movement is in the suburbs, but we'll see. Ryan.
Okay, this is going to be a bit different from the previous two takes, because I think both have broadly been good for Harris or Democrats. I'm taking the Sherrod Brown was never going to win takes, even though the consensus I think still might actually be that he's going to win. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to play
Anti-ticket
on
splitting. You took one of mine.
Yeah.
I was gonna do ticket splitting. Ticket splitting is a myth.
I mean, well, so here's my thing with ticket splitting. I actually don't think it's going to be like if you went back to like 2004, whenever, and you like looked at how ticket splitting has evolved between presidential elections, it's gone down. It's like linearly, right? I think that ticket splitting is between 2020 and 2024 going to see the least sharp decline. That's only because it was so bad in 2020. So I'm not sure if I'm taking the full ticket splitting point here. I'm just taking, look, Sherrod Brown, right? He's up by 2.5 points in Ohio. He's not at 50% of the vote. Republicans have come to town to save Moreno. Trump's going to win the state by 9, right? If that happens on election night and we get Trump plus 9 in Ohio and Brown loses by 3 or 2 maybe, right? I think everyone's going to be like, well, did we really expect Sherrod Brown to overcome a 9-10 point ticket split and win, right? You know, to me, because I do think Sherrod Brown is not going to win re-election, I think we're going to see a lot of those narratives in the same way we saw, by the way, you know, in 2020, where this was kind of a different scenario, but a lot of people literally on the morning of the election were saying the Democrats were at a 40% chance of winning Alaska or Kansas or even Montana with Steve Bullock, right? And then election happened, and no one. Hold on. Hey, Evan, hold on. Excuse me. I very specifically left out South Carolina because I'm nice. Okay, fine. I very specifically left out Jamie Harrison in South Carolina.
Let me back up. Let me back up Ryan's point with 2 points before.
Can I just say one thing?
Go.
And then I'll let you go.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. Sorry, I just want to say one more thing. And then everyone was like, "Well, you know, who expected Barbara Bollier and Steve Bullock to overcome 10, 12-point ticket splits?" Sherrod Brown's in the same situation. He's a good incumbent, but he wasn't tested well enough in 2018 to give me that confidence. I'm taking Moreno here, and I think that post-election night, a lot of people are going to talk about it as if it was more obvious than it really, you know, seemed to be.
Sherrod Brown's a fraud of a star.
Whoa!
Absolute fraud. He only outran Obama by 3 points in 2012 against Josh Mandel. He only outran Richard Cordray by 11, but that was against a worse candidate who had no money. He had a $25 million cash advantage, plus an advantage on outside spending against Jim Renassi, and only won by 7. Ohio polls are terrible. Nearly 8-point misses in both 2016 and 2020. Worse than that, even, is that they've been bad they were bad in 2018, unlike a lot of the other states. So you can't even just say, oh, it's just only a Trump effect, because Mike DeWine was supposed to lose by a point. He ends up winning by 4. It was a 5-point polling miss in that race. You know, the notion here that Sherrod has ever been in a toss-up or favorable race is nonsense, and I'm glad Ryan took it just so I could do all this ranting.
I think that there's a lot that's going to be said about, well, could we have just skipped all the Trump gap between the GOP Senate nominee conversation to just say, like, yeah, they were all novices. They had name ID to climb. Turns out when you dump $30 million into the race, a lot more people know the name of Bernie Moreno and Eric Hovde and Dave McCormick. And that's just what happens. And as soon as you do that, if Donald Trump wins, and he is going to win Ohio, right now the RCP average has him up 7.4. Harris is yet to crack 45 percentage points. I think Sherrod Brown will probably outrun him a little bit, but I don't think by much. If anything, this has now become, dare I say, Ohio is a little like Florida, Texas-y for Democrats. They love to talk about how strong their candidates are there, but really, what are we doing? What are we doing?
The thing is, it's actually worse than Texas, because at least Texas is trending the right way, and Ohio is very clearly sprinting away from Democrats.
Trending the other way.
Like this is almost West Virginia-ish in the sense that it's just running away, and you might be able to win it 1 or 2 more times in very good years with very specific people, but like it's moving off the board, and we all just need to accept it.
All right. We're going to have to lightning round here to get to the end, but my final pick, and this is going to be a pro-Trump one. that this ticket, Harris-Walz, is the worst in history. Now, wait for it. It's not that I believe that it is the worst in history, but let's game out a world in which Trump wins. Who among Biden, Harris, or Walz is really going to be a player in 2028? I don't think any of them. They're all going to get burned by the establishment because you are going to have jackals that will be pouring gasoline on this, talking about how it is very specifically their fault. It's certainly not the fault of the donors. It's certainly not the fault of anybody behind the scenes, maybe Solis Doyle or somebody, but it is going to be them that takes the blame. And if they take the blame, worst ticket ever is going to be something that the Democrats will affix to them.
Yeah, I agree it's going to be affixed to them. I also agree I also think it's a crock of shit that it's going to be affixed to them, because if you had told everybody that Kamala Harris was going to have us in a toss-up race where we're probably slight favorites to win the House, I think that's the model consensus right now, people would be thrilled if that's what you had said on July 20th or whatever, that Kamala Harris would take us there, and now suddenly that's not good enough for Democrats.
Yeah, I'm with both you guys. I hope it doesn't happen, but I could see the overreaction happening. But I think it's unwarranted.
All right, Evan.
People are going to blame the speakership drama for why House Republicans lose the majority, and it's not going to be that at all. It's going to be a simple fact of math, which is to say that Republicans have a bunch of left-trending suburban seats that they won, either left-trending suburban seats or just generally very Democratic seats that they shouldn't have won if not for California and New York Democrats sucking in 2022. They're going to lose the House off of basic political reality. They're going to blame it. They're going to blame it on House, dysfunction and the Freedom Caucus and Mike McCarthy. Who was this? Kevin McCarthy. Mike McCarthy.
Kevin McCarthy.
Wow.
Kevin.
That's that was a Freudian slip.
Freudian slip. Freudian slip.
But they're going to blame it on that nonsense, and what it's going to be is that the California and New York Democrats are going to benefit from higher turnout. A couple of these suburban seats, Don Bacon, maybe a Zach Nunn in Iowa, maybe Tom Keene in New Jersey, are going to get swept out with the wave, and that's why Democrats are going to win the House. And none of what happened in D.C. is going to matter in the slightest.
I totally agree with that. All right, Ryan.
My last pick, I was going to take Democrats were going to win the House, or we're always going to win the House, but Evan basically just took that, literally sniped it from me and talked about the suburban seats too, which was going to be my whole thing. So I'm just going to call an audible here. I'm going to take Senate Democrats had a floor of 48, which is going to sound bad if Casey or Baldwin loses, but I'm reasonably confident that won't happen. Democrats are likely to win on top of the seats that they would always win. I think they're in good shape in Nevada and Arizona. I think Michigan looks good given the polling delta between Harris and Slotkin being 3 to 4 points. I don't think Harris will lose Michigan by 3 to 4. And then the final seats would be, unless I'm missing something, they would likely be Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Both those seats I think those are the two most competitive seats. Democrats are favored to win outright, but I don't see Republicans closing the gap just because the delta between Harris and then Baldwin and Harris and then Casey is big enough. So yeah, the polls show it. I think the conventional wisdom still reflects it, even though the gap is closing. Democrats should win 48 Senate seats on election night, and maybe they get lucky to Ohio. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think the floor for them realistically is going to be 48.
I love that you took both sides of the ticket splitting argument. you have split your ticket splitting opinions.
No, I mean it's only fair.
A sign of the times. All right. A good draft. We have 9 great narratives. Friends, listeners, viewers, select your own. Put it in the comments. What is the narrative that everybody is going to be talking about at the end of this race? Evan, where can people find you?
Follow me on Twitter at @Scrimshaw, political writing @scrimshawscripted.substack.com, political betting, NFL, NHL, and whatever I can get through my editors at thelines.com. Buy my book, Salvation in the Storm.
And Ryan.
You can find me on YouTube at Understand Politics. Again, I make content like similar to the content that Justin makes. We talk about elections in depth over there. If you liked what you saw from me here, I really would appreciate it if you gave me a follow on YouTube, on my channel. You can follow me on Twitter at Ryan Jakubowski as well. Thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate it. And Evan, of course.
Of course. Thank you, boys.
Thanks.
He is at Real Carl Allen on Substack, and that's who he is. He is a real Carl Allen. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you came to my attention because as I have relocated and rehomed my podcast here on Substack, I have found a very vibrant community of a lot of people that are writing back and forth, and some great little esoteric arguments that were going back and forth. And it was one that you were a part of that I want to bring to the audience, and that is, amongst the world of pollsters, the idea of what might matter more, especially in a super close race like we are watching right now, either the vote share of what each candidate gets or the margin. Can you please explain it like we were five, because a lot of the people listening to this are not crosstab divers?
No, you know what? That's okay. The basics of poll data that I talk about in my book, the basics are not too technical or complex for anyone who wants to understand poll data to understand. The first thing I talk about in my book, chapter 2, very, very early on, how polls work, what data we get from polls. Polls are designed to give us an estimate of a candidate's base of support. Polls are not intended to tell us how much someone is ahead by, or how much someone is going to win by. Interpreting polls as predictions has been going on since the earliest polls were conducted, Literary Digest and Gallup 100 years ago. And it is the most fundamentally flawed problem right now in any established science, And my goal is to fix it and help analysts that are currently working in the field to do better work, but also give the public the tools that they need. So when we look at vote share is the data the poll is trying to give us. The margin of error that we see in the poll does not apply to how much someone is up by. It applies to what their vote share is right now. And the reason that I was in such a frustrating debate with someone who should know better is that his exact words were 50% is not that important in a poll. And I said, 50% is not that important in a poll, but 50% is the most important number in an election because we know it guarantees victory. So with a proper understanding of how polls work, which is to say an estimated base of support, if you're getting 50% in polls, there's a good chance that you get at least 50% in the election, therefore win. So when we look at poll data right now, it is still being reported by how much someone is up by 1, up by 3, up by 6, whatever. Yeah. But the more important numbers are the actual numbers from the poll, which is to say, is the candidate who is up by 2 at 47 or 49. There's a big, big difference. There's a big, big difference between those, and I go into why in the book. Our mind isn't quite, it's not quite intuitive to say 47 and 49 are very different numbers. But if you understand 50% guarantees that you win, being a little bit closer to 50 is extremely valuable.
Well, and I think it's specifically interesting in this election because of who is running. Donald Trump is famously, we have now seen as much empirical data as anybody could possibly see as a presidential candidate, because you usually don't see him run a third time, that he is a pretty consistent 48% hard capped candidate. Like he can, especially in the swing states, he's not going to get over 50. He's going to, at his best, get into the high decimal points of 48, and that's pretty much it. Independents have turned off on him, at least the ones that would get him higher than that. And so the theory of the case of why Joe Biden isn't the candidate still is that his vote share was falling below that. If people still believed that he could get to 49 and 50 in the Rust Belt, then I think he would probably still be on the ballot. The scratch-off lottery ticket was hoping that Kamala could. It seems like that's been the case, although I'm curious, your point, you wrote at least the initial post about this back and forth at about a week and a half ago, since then, you've seen what we declared on the podcast on Wednesday, a vibes emergency for Kamala Harris, with data, both hard and soft, not being as rosy as she would have otherwise. And as a novice, I'm looking at those Real Clear Politics averages, and I'm seeing them get a little bit too close to that 47% line. What are you seeing right now?
That's a great point. So you brought up about 3 or 4 different points in that, and I want to get to all of them.
Yeah.
I'll start with the
buffet. I'm weaving. It is the season.
Okay. No, I do it too. That's all right. Poll averages are much, much, much better than any individual poll. We've gotten to that point where the public understands that and experts understand that individual polls tell us very little. The problem with poll averages is there is no objective way to take a poll average. The simplest example that I give, if Real Carl Allen says that the most recent 5 polls is how we should take an average, and you guys, politics, say the 10 most recent polls is the best way to take a poll average, who's right and why? The answer is we have made the decision as the poll aggregator, as the person taking the average, of which polls to include, which polls not to include, and how much each poll counts for. And this shirking of accountability is something that is actively happening right now. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, G. Elliott Morris posted something about our poll averages take into account House effects and partisan bias, et cetera, but that's not a guarantee that the polls won't be wrong. I said, whoa, hold on. The polls, no, sir. Your poll averages. This shirking of accountability, if our forecast was wrong, it's the poll's fault. If our poll averages were wrong, it's the poll's fault. You need to take some accountability here. So in my book, I actually outline the reasons these different aspects can be wrong, and that each person responsible for the poll, responsible for the poll average, responsible for the forecast, has to take accountability. I say if your forecast was wrong, that's a forecast error, period. Why it was wrong, you can cry about all you want, but if your forecast was wrong, that's a forecast error. We have to stop blaming the polls for things that are not in their purview. Real Clear Politics has a very strong partisan bias. For about the first 10 to 12 years up through Trump 2016, they were very transparent and they did a really good job. But now they're including more partisan polls and excluding more good ones. So their poll averages are skewed. I actually, on my Substack, when I update my poll averages, I list Silver's 538s, Real Clear Politics, and also the simple recent average of like the most 10 polls to let people see how we take our average can nudge the numbers 1 or 2 points in any direction. So that's really, really important. The other note that you mentioned about Joe Biden, back in July when Joe Biden was still the candidate, or still the presumptive candidate, I guess, he was polling in the low 40s. His poll numbers were not good. The problem or the challenge with that is Trump was still only polling at 45, 46, 47. Trump's poll average since July has not increased that much. What has happened is a lot of people who didn't want Joe Biden to be the candidate were not willing to say to a pollster, I will vote for Joe Biden, because they were, hesitant about him being the candidate in the first place. So a lot of those undecideds 4 months ago were what I would consider lean Democrat undecideds. Meaning, if it came down to it and they had to check one of those boxes, they would probably have voted for Joe Biden. But in July, they would have, but the problem with that is when people are not passionate, when people are not motivated, you might not get your base to turn out. You might not get the swing voters. So Biden was not an ideal candidate for Democrats at that point. Kamala Harris quickly, very, very quickly consolidated those lean Democrat undecideds. And we were looking at 48, 49, 48 in the poll averages. And that's basically where it's been for the past month. The other note that you made about Trump's ceiling, the MAGA ceiling, we have so much data. Analysts usually do not have this much data to build out our forecasts. So what we typically have to do is we take all of this data, we find what we consider the median, we find a range of likely outcomes, and it usually looks like a nice, pretty bell curve with an equal chance of getting to 45 and 55, right? So it's kind of a good, nice looking normal distribution. With Trump, we have two elections. We have two elections of him being on the ballot. We have two elections of a lot of polls, all of these swing states. He only got over 50% in, I want to say, Georgia 2016. And then obviously 2020, he only got to 49 and lost. All the other swing states, he was stuck at that 49 ceiling. So we have two elections of data to say, yes, Trump could get to 50, 51. It is possible. It is a very non-zero possibility. But if we're thinking probabilistically, if we're trying to think, well, we have two elections of Trump on the ballot and he's barely got to 49 in any state, that lends a little bit of credibility to this idea that maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't plug a poll average into a historically calibrated forecast, get a nice, pretty normal distribution, and say, yes, Trump is equally likely to get to 45 as 55. That doesn't quite make sense. There are different mathematical concepts that are a little technical, like kurtosis, the shape of the chart, the skewedness of the chart. Frankly, in my analysis, in my forecast, I take this into account. I say it is highly likely that Trump gets to 47 or 48 in most of these swing states because his floor, his base is that high. But just because he's highly likely to get to 48 does not mean he is more likely to get to 51. So that gets into a little more technical things, but I'm very transparent about how my forecasts work. And for anyone listening, forecasting is both an art and a science. And if any forecaster tells you that their forecast is the right one and they are only using poll data, every forecast makes a ton of assumptions. The fewer assumptions you think you make, the more assumptions you are making. And we have to be very clear about that when you're forecasting, because there are very, very, there's very poor work being done, not by 538 Silver. They do kind of okay work. They have issues, but there are a lot of people who put out data that doesn't really make sense. And I talk about that in the book as well. There's been such a growth in people wanting to forecast elections, and prediction markets are huge right now. There's been a huge growth in interest, but the poor work, the level of work being done has not caught up with the level of interest in the topic. So there's so much work to be done in the field, and I'm just trying to get freaking started, you know?
The boom in prediction in the at least the predictive Silver-esque models, that was because he predicted all 50 states in the Obama reelect, right? Like that was one. I remember that was 2012. 2016, everybody and their mom had one.
Yeah.
Embarrassing ones with Trump at like 0.5 percentage point to win. And so it chastened people a little bit for 2020, but it feels like now we're in a little bit of a healthy medium. And I agree with you. Like, this is both an art and a science. I do like them when they have personality. I like when the models can explain what they are doing, the assumptions they are making about the electorate, and why they are directing their numbers or why you're seeing the numbers that they are doing. It's why I think I very much enjoyed Nate Silver's current arc on Substack, because I feel like he's got permission to be a little more sassy about whatever he wants to talk about. And I think it was the shame of the new 538, because they did like the cardinal sin, which is lack of transparency or at least lack of discussion. And it was like really embarrassing when they had to shut their model down and stuff like that.
It was very embarrassing, but I'm not surprised that it happened. I know the quality of these guys' work. Silver and Morris, they've contributed some things to the field, but they are not, they've kind of hit their ceiling also in what they can contribute because of how they do their analysis, because of how they think about poll data. They are building models based on this margin analysis, and they're building models based on this incorrect definition of poll error. They literally think I have to be very clear that I'm not exaggerating. I'm not taking any artistic liberties. These guys and some women literally think that polls, if they are accurate, will predict the election result, not just who wins, but also by how much. And it is painfully easy to prove that wrong. And my background, I wasn't a statistician 5-10 years ago. I was a scientist, so I was doing experiments, building studies. When I talk to people who don't follow poll data, they are floored when I explain to them how this analysis is done. They're like, wait, confounding variables, they don't account for those? Nope, they make assumptions and they pretend they don't exist. So there is so much work to be done. Nate Silver, 2008 and 2012 was kind of his rise to fame. Talk about that in the book. He is given credit.
Fascinated, Carl.
Yeah. He is given credit for predicting the outcome of 49 out of 50 states, 50 out of 50 states. But here's the thing. All he did was put a probability on it. He said Obama was 80% to win this state, 90% to win this state, 70% to win this state. And it turned out each state Obama was favored in, he won. And that was Silver's rise to fame. You'll note, nowhere in that conversation did Nate Silver say, hey guys, wait a minute. I wasn't predicting Obama would win these states. I was simply putting a probability on it, and it happened that I had the right favorite. So I'm going to read you a quick quote from the book here because it's very, very important and very relevant to your question. It's unfair to ask the public who has been wrongly convinced of polls as predictions to suddenly accept a nuanced and relatively advanced understanding of the difference between polls and forecasts. The added layer of hypocrisy comes when forecasters brag about how many states they called right when they're right, but want to chastise the public for not understanding it's just a probability when their calls are wrong. So you remember what happened in 2016. Nate Silver had probably the best forecast of all the major forecasters, but he said Hillary was favored in all of these states. And what happened? Oh, no. The public is stupid. You guys just don't get it. I'm just putting a probability on things. I'm not saying that they're going to win. Wait, buddy. In 2012, when Obama won all of the states that you said he was favored in, you were perfectly content. You were perfectly content to take all the credit. When people said, yeah, you called these right, 50 out of 50, woohoo. And then 2016 rolls around and suddenly the public is stupid? No, you have a responsibility to not take too much credit when you don't deserve it. And then you can say, I shouldn't take as much blame when I don't deserve it. But you don't get it both ways. You don't get to get all the credit when you're right, and then don't take any of the blame when you're wrong.
I'm very, very glad that you have pointed that out because I think Silver, by and large, has not been the worst offender of it, but it is a very big pet peeve of mine that when everybody, and this is also, here's where it annoys me the most. It annoys me the most when you just get further and further confusing infographics on these sites because they are like, no, the dumbs are too excited by a very simple, this is more likely or this is less likely. The dumbs, they get too fired up about the needle, and if the needle's wrong, then we're going to get yelled at. So now we have to do 50,000 polygons. That's more of a dumb visualization of something where it's like, no, you want to know what? Even the best version of this is something that could be on its face flawed on some level. There are hidden things that we might not be able to see. Everybody's taking an educated guess. Just do it boldly. Do it boldly. Explain what you're doing, and then move on. If it's not right, then get it better next time. I think that there's a very scared and hypocritical element to it sometimes.
Huge, absolutely enormous. The best example, to your point, was 2016 when Sam Wong and Huffington Post and some of these other forecasters were putting out Hillary's 99% to win, 99.9% to win, indefensible numbers. The way they got to those numbers demonstrates that they don't understand poll data. You can't be that confident in the numbers that were given because, again, Hillary was up by 6 in all of the swing states, but guess what? Her poll average was not above 47% in any swing state, not one, not even Maine, not even New Hampshire. Her poll average indicated that she could lose, whether that was a 10%, 20%, 30, whatever percentage you wanted to put on it, but she was not 99% to win. She probably wasn't 90% to win. So the fact that these objectively very smart people could reach such poor conclusions kind of gave me the confidence that I needed to say, hey, I can do better than this. If people read my work and say, oh, he's not that smart, or well, he's wrong about this, well, fine, show me where I'm wrong. Show me where I'm wrong, show me how. I don't think I am, but I am not too big to admit that I could be. So if I'm wrong, show me where and how and why, and I'll try to fix it. But what happened in 2016 is these same analysts who were doing this poor work were not really chastised. They were not really kicked out of the field. 2020, Sam Wong, Huffington Post, the same people were informing the people, they were informing the public, oh, the polls were wrong. Our forecasts were only bad because the polls were wrong. And there's that same mentality of it's not my fault, it's not my fault. And we have to, if this field is going to be a respectable academic field and not akin to DraftKings and sports betting and and these people that are just hyping entertainers, basically. If this is going to be a legitimate field, we have to do better. And my book is the first step in that direction.
Well, you've given a great example of where the flaws of our field, or of this field, are. But let's take a look. You are keeping an average of this election. Like I mentioned before, there has been a vibe emergency declared. Is that real, or is that just the horse race looking for the snout that's pushing a little four behind the leader?
It's mostly noise at this point. In 2022, in the midterms, if you remember, there was the same vibe shift. There was the same panic about keeping the Senate. The red wave is coming, et cetera, et cetera. And I was confident then that Democrats should be favored to keep the Senate. Pennsylvania, I thought Democrats, Fetterman was stronger than other people. Kelly in Arizona, Hassan in New Hampshire. There were just kind of across the board. I'm like, guys, I'm not seeing this data. And I said, wait a minute. I think I see what's happening. Partisan pollsters, for the first time in 2022, partisan pollsters, I can't say for sure that they were actively trying to do it, but I can say for sure that the effect was they were influencing the poll averages for everyone.
Yeah.
They were moving the averages 1 or 2 points. In 2022, more than half of the polls making up 538's average in New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and a couple other states, more than half of them were partisan pollsters. And to me, I saw that happening. So I posted on social media very frequently. I said, guys, these partisan pollsters are putting out 45s and 46s for, say, Fetterman, when all of these other pollsters are putting out 48s and 49s. That's kind of shady. That kind of doesn't fit the vibe, so to speak. And so I noticed this kind of flooding before we called it flooding. I said, hey, these partisan pollsters are trying to influence things. We should account for that. And my analysis did. And again, that was the assumption that I made, right? Maybe these partisan pollsters are doing totally legitimate, accurate work, and we should give them equal weight to nonpartisan pollsters. But I said, I can't do it. There's too much influence. There's too much potential for manipulation. And Nate Silver's quote was, polling is a free market, that Democratic-leaning pollsters could release polls too, that they don't says something. So his hypothesis was the fact that Republican-leaning pollsters were releasing poll data, but Democratic-leaning pollsters weren't, was that's probably because the Democratic-leaning pollsters aren't getting good data.
Yeah,
so they don't want to release it.
They're seeing the same information. They just don't want to release it.
Correct. And I said, I wouldn't bet on that. I wouldn't bet on that. Different motivations encourage partisan pollsters to release poll data. And Democratic-leaning pollsters in 2022 might have said, hey, the fact that the public thinks we're kind of even or behind might motivate the hell out of them. Let's just stay out of it. And I think that's what's happening again in 2024. All of these partisan-leaning pollsters, 3 or 4 kind of release polls at the same time, and poll averages move a couple tenths. A couple tenths doesn't feel like much, but in a close election, it is. So when we're talking about three or four polls coming out at the same time that have very similar results favorable for Trump, and these poll averages are moving, we have to understand that this oftentimes is to manipulate our psychology and to shift the vibes. That's what it is for. That is the purpose of them. It's not to be accurate. It's not to, do anything other than influence how we think about the election. And also, believe it or not, to please the guy at the top to make sure that he's happy with them because he's the one writing the checks in his party.
It is the Republican money system that's putting these polls into the field in the first place.
Yeah. Now I have to say, look, the election is close. The election is close.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie and say I think Harris is going to win by a comfortable margin in all of the swing states. I do not think it is as close, especially in the blue wall states, as some polling averages have right now. And again, part of that is the partisan pollster bias. That's part of it. And another part of it is, hey, people are already voting. Yeah. Yes, poll data is still important, but once we start getting more data from who's voting, where they're voting, turnout, poll data still is useful, but we have to recalibrate and say, hey, if more Democrats are voting than expected, that's a good sign for Democrats and vice versa. So we're getting very close to the point where poll data is still very useful, but when people are already voting, that changes things.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's another thing we're going to have to bring you back on because I would love to hear your perspective on watching. To me, there are fewer signs that you are an unrepentant junkie that loves misery. It's like betting on preseason football and watching early vote returns and trying to divine a result of an end election because they are such a hall of mirrors, at least as I have kind of from a distance tried to follow them. One last thing before we get you out of here, Carl. We are asking all of our guests that I believe that there are 4 ways that this election ends. We will go from the rosiest for the Republicans. This is PAC's MAGA. It is a Donald Trump win. We're going to go as far as Senator Kari Lake. They sweep the board, put a margin up in the Senate, and then a Republican House. Scenario 2, this is Democratic civil war. This is a narrow Trump win because of the map. The Republicans do win the Senate, but the Democrats win the House, and so therefore you have a big fight in the Democratic Party because the brand was strong. It was the leadership that was bad, the top of the ticket that was bad. We then have scenario 3. This is the coin flip on the Democratic side. Kamala narrowly wins. The map still gives the Republicans the Senate, and the Democrats win the House. And then our final one, the blue skies for the blue team. This is a blowout victory for Kamala. She runs up the score, a Biden plus North Carolina in the Electoral College. It is a Senator Colin Allred, Senator woman from Florida, whose name I still cannot remember, and I swear to God this isn't a bit. I just can't remember her name because I've done this 3 times now. And then a Democratic House. So of those 4, what do you believe is the most likely?
Mercosal Powell is her name.
Yes.
She probably has the best chance of the 4 stretch states to win the Senate. But the Senate is a very, very, very tall task. Democrats have to win one of Nebraska, Florida. You get your follow. Your listeners know this. Democrats have to win 2 of Ohio, Nebraska, Florida, Texas, and what's the one other? Missouri, I think, is kind of or Montana. Montana is the other one. Scenario 3 is most likely. Scenario 3 is most likely. Scenario 3, a narrow, relatively speaking, electoral college victory for Kamala Harris, but Democrats only end at 48 or 49 Senate seats is most likely. Scenarios 1 and 4 are both approximately equally likely, about 15% on either tail of a very, very good night for Democrats, a very, very good night for Republicans. We're basically talking about a 3-point swing in that kind of landslide. Now, in my forecast, I have Kamala Harris as a favorite. Scenario 4 is slightly more likely than scenario 1. Scenario two is actually not that likely, because in order for Republicans to win the presidency, they will very likely need to win a lot of districts in these swing states like Arizona, Michigan. I'm trying to remember some other swing districts and where they are, but Pennsylvania has a couple. That means that if they've won the presidency, they've also probably won the House. So we're looking at the probability of a Republican trifecta is slightly higher than a probability of a Democratic trifecta, but 48 or 49 Senate seats for Democrats, scenario 3, I think is the most likely outcome, probably 40 to 50%.
I'll tell you what, you can't ask for any better than that. That is table side guac for forecasting analysis for our scenarios. Thank you. Real Carl Allen. Everybody go ahead and follow the man's Substack. I have found it to be fantastic. And of course, go and buy The Polls Weren't Wrong. That is available right now wherever you buy books. Carl, we will have you back on the show because I've had a great time talking to you. Have a great day. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks again, man. Anytime.
And that will wrap it up for us today. I want to thank all the people that you heard on this show today. I want to thank Jason Whitley of WFAA, and a big shout out to Pete Friedman, who is an old friend, Dio Mafia, who hooked that up. Thank you, Pete, for doing that. I want to thank Evan Scrimshaw. I want to thank Ryan Jakubowski, who did our narrative draft with us. Always great to have those guys on. Follow Evan everywhere that you heard him talk about. And, of course, Ryan Jakubowski is on Understanding Politics on YouTube. And then Carl Allen, he was a lightning rod, man. I loved talking to him. He is great, and he immediately also joined our chat on Substack. So if you have any questions about Carl Allen or to Carl Allen, you could probably just hit him up, and he'll get back to you. It was awesome to have him on. Go buy his book, The Polls Weren't Wrong. A reminder that if you want to email us, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. You can find us on social media. Justin R. Young is where you get us at TikTok, Instagram, and X. We are on YouTube. Politics on YouTube. You can support me with a one-time donation. If you liked anything that you heard on this show, hit me with a one-time donation. PayPal.me/PayJury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash. And you can send me anything you like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Again, that is P.O. Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Only place that you can get our bonus content is at takepoliticsseriously.com, our brand new Substack. Again, if you were on Patreon and you're like, why isn't my Patreon feed working? Did the RSS feed break? No, we are not posting the Patreon anymore. We are now posting to Substack. And if you were on Patreon, you have all of the podcasts that you had before for free. Substack's giving you a giving you a feed with all the stuff. You're getting a free month because they're giving you a grace period so you can move your payment information over. So head on over, do that. We are now both a $12 flat a month, so you're going to save a little money moving over to Substack. And also, again, the big deal, $99 for 150 episodes of PX3. Available to you for a very limited time, right up until Halloween, and we are closing in on spooky season here. And then, of course, we have our Titanic tier. This is, I love these guys. not only do we do this all the time, we do this every single week, and there was always people that supported us in such a great and generous way on Patreon. But now, because of the way Substack works, you got to pay up front for it. And I knew we were going to shake some loose because that's a lot to ask for. But the folks who have come over, gosh darn it, man. Thank you so much for doing it, including a dog named Checkers, Lee Anna Moore. She said, where's my name? I got you. Lee. There you go. Peepaw. Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom Merritt, Jeremy, Chiller Tomatoes. Oh, yeah, it's Adam. AB Puppy, David, Dr. Whiskey, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Michael, Matthew, Will, the Borge B, Matthew, Edwin, Andrew, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Devon, Paul, Gloria Young, my mom, Berkeley, Stephen, John, and Ryan. I'm going to be sending an email to everybody this week asking for updated names that you want me to read at the end of this. But thank you to everybody who has done it so far. If you believe that you need your name read on it and you haven't heard it, well, first thing, go to takepoliticsseriously.com, sign up at that Titanic level. And then if you already have and I haven't read it, send me an email. I'll make it up to you. Don't worry about it. On next week's show, man, we're going to have a lot to live up to these next few weeks, but I'm going to do it. I'm putting it together, man. We're bringing great guests on. We have a bunch of returns. Bill Scher, back on the show. Kirk Beto, back on the show. And many, many, many more. I'm trying to, I don't know if you guys have figured this out. I'm overbooking this program because you guys deserve it. It's crunch time, baby. We're under 20 days away. We'll see you on Sunday for the Substack Faithful. Until then, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying that some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics. But this is the only show that dares discuss three.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.